Hey folks, welcome back. Time for a little bit more Starfleet battles discussion. So, last time I gave you a very long-winded explanation of the game system and tried to recommend a few good places to start. So, namely, pick up the basic set, master that, pick up the advanced mission set, master that, then pick up module C1, C2, C3, so you have all the basic empires in play. And I stand by that, but just before I get started here, the main focus of the video is going to be about the R module series. So this is adding ships to the game system. There's tons of cool ships in these modules, but there's a lot of them. So I thought it would be helpful for me to outline kind of what you get in each one, show you a little preview so you know what might spark your interest. Okay, so R modules. I briefly touched on these in the previous video. Basically, each R module is mainly focused on adding new ships to the game. There's not really a lot of rules content to worry about. So it's going to be counters and ships galore. The first four modules, so R1 is not here. I don't have it because, frankly, R1 is about bases and auxiliary ships and is mainly more relevant for people doing campaigns and stuff. You know, you might be building up bases in an area and trying to maintain control on a campaign map, and your opponent will be trying to do the same. It's not super relevant to me in the games that I played, so I don't have that one at the moment. I think it's also due to be updated soon, so I will get it once it's been updated. So I focused on R2 through R12. Those are the really interesting ones, even outside of a campaign context. So the first three, they really give you a nice selection of useful ships for all the main empires. So for example, for the Feds, you get war destroyers in various different variants. Space control ships, which are kind of like big tough carriers. You've got some named variants, the Bismarck, New Jersey, heavy dreadnoughts, plus 25 more ships. The Kzintis, you get scout drone frigates, more carriers, dreadnoughts, heavy battle cruisers. Orions get heavy raiders, medium raiders, attack raiders, heavy battle cruisers, pirate war destroyers. Andromedans get a mauler, a scout ship. They get a couple of cargo ships with cargo pods. So really, tons of cool stuff in here. And you can see, once again, we get a full sheet of counters, which is great. So you can use multiples of a lot of these. Here's your space control ship. You've got your battle cruisers. You've got new cruisers, various frigates. Then you've got F-15 fighters. Just a whole ton of stuff for the Feds in here, plus some mine counters. That's handy. There's also some, I believe, plasma-firing Federation ships in this module as well. Then we've got some stuff for the Andromedans, mines and transporter bombs as utility items, and then the few new ships that were introduced in the module. A ton of Kzinti stuff, loads of content for them. A bunch of Orion bits as well, including some handy drone and plasma torp counters. And Orion fighters for the Lion's Heart Cartel, it looks like. So yeah, lots of cool ships in here. And this is kind of the character of the first three R modules, really. Just general cool stuff. Nothing super specialized that'll never come up unless you're in a campaign or whatever. I mean, these are pretty broadly useful things. Kzinti Dreadnought is a big, tough beast, really fun to use. And it says here, for example, this ship can control a number of seeking weapons equal to double its sensor rating. So with some of these ships, you're getting into that Kzinti specialty of just firing loads and loads of drones all over the map, which is lots of fun. And what else we got in here? Loads and loads of Feds, and some of them more specialized roles, like a minesweeper, good for some scenarios. We got priority transports, lots of different war destroyer variants, which are really nice. Inexpensive but tough little beasts. Got escort cruisers. We've got a new dreadnought, which has some variation over the regular dreadnought. The Aegis cruiser, which is great for defending your carriers from seeking weapons. Just loads and loads of cool stuff. So really, if you're into using the main core empires of the game, the first three R modules are really great to get. I think you really don't need to worry about complicated rules coming into play. It's just cool stuff that you can just jump into, basically. R3, as you can see, covers a different subset of the empires. We've got Klingons, Hydrons, WYN, and the Lyrans. And it gives you a sampling on the back of what you can expect. So we got some escorts, drone escorts, space control ships again, battle cruisers, maulers, drone cruisers, a bunch of stuff for the Hydrons, including medium cruisers, command cruisers. Some really cool stuff like the Iron Duke carrier and the Lord Paladin. Those are really fun, very scary ships to fly, in my opinion. Got a bunch of stuff for the Lyrans, really nice big selection for them, and a few bits and bobs for the WYN as well. So lots in here for your cash. This module, I believe, was also updated not too far away in the past, so we've got new style counters, hooray! These have nice colored pictures of all the ships. You can see just a load of stuff here for the Klingons. Loads and loads, which is really great. We've got all kinds of escort ships, drone variants, different cruiser variants, some Romulan hulls in the sort of the wartime trade between the Romulans and the Klingons. The Romulans use some Klingon hulls and vice versa. We have some mines, some shuttles for utility. Then we've got a bunch of cool stuff here for the WYN. And these nice bright and vibrant yellow counters. Then on these vibrant yellow counters, we have the Lyrans, which I love their counters because the ships are varied in color. The Lyrans are kind of composed of a bunch of different kind of sub-kingdoms, and I guess they all have their own aesthetics. Then we have my main men, the Hydrons, a bunch more fighter counters. We've got all their pretty cool big carriers and stuff. There's the Iron Duke, which is one of my favorite ships. Where's the Lord Paladin? Should be in here somewhere. Lots of Tartar medium cruisers. They're kind of a workhorse for the Hydron fleet. Got some Monarchs in here. There we go. There's a Lord Paladin. So this guy and the Iron Duke are real big and tough and scary. And again, we got some more fighters here. So loads of great stuff in this module for some of my favorite empires, namely the Lyrans, the Klingons, and the Hydrons. I think they're all really great fun to fly. Again, I'll just show off a couple things in the SSD book. Won't spend too much time on it. Let's see. Oh, here we have a Klingon war cruiser Mauler. So again, on every Mauler SSD, you'll find they show you the two different main firing arcs for Maulers, which is really handy. And of course, you have the arrows here indicating all these connected power sources can be used to power the Mauler. And the closer the enemy is to the Mauler's blast, the more damage they will take. And the more power you put into the blast, the more damaging it will be as well. So they're really into like screeching to a halt in front of a weakened enemy and blasting them into oblivion, or doing huge damage to a stationary target like a base or something. So yeah, lots of pretty cool options for the Klingons here. Then let's see, where is my friend the Iron Duke? Overlord. There's a command cruiser. Minesweeper, escort cruiser, survey ship, command cruiser. Well, here, that's good enough. Lord Bishop command cruiser. So this is a cruiser, battle value around 150, which is pretty standard for a cruiser. But it comes in the Hydron style with 3 Stinger 2s, armed with fusions and phaser Gatlings, which is always good. We have some fusion beams as well for close destruction, and 4 Hellbores, which are just a great fun weapon to use. I really want to show you one of my favorite Hydrons, so I need to go back to the table of contents. Let's see. Where's the Iron Duke? Page 46. Yeah. Okay. Sorry for the flipping around here, but yeah, here we go. This is it. This bad boy here, that Iron Duke heavy carrier. Point value 205, but it really, once you add in all the fighters, that number's going to shoot into the stratosphere. You can see we get a whole load of shuttle boxes here and a lot of fighters we can carry. It also comes armed with fusions and Hellbores, so you can really blast on your opponent's weak shields, which is great fun. You can carry Stinger 2s, Stinger E's, which are electronic warfare stingers like this guy here. They don't have fusion beams, but they have these electronic warfare pods. And the Stinger H, which carries little Hellbore charges, which can really rack up more shield damage on your opponent. So, yeah, basically with these first 3 modules, you can kind of figure this out for yourself, really. But as you can tell, you know, if you want to focus in on a particular subset of the empires, grab the R2, R3, or R4 module that fits your preferences. And I say, really, just go for it. There's a lot of cool ships in these. They're not by no means filled with boring stuff. And a lot of them will actually give you ideas for cool duels and scenarios you can set up yourself. So finally, in the beginning of the R series, we have the module R4, where we have the Romulans, the Gorn, the Tholians, and the ISC. Again, I really like playing a lot of these empires. In particular, the Tholians and the ISC are fun for me, but really all of them have something to offer. I think the Gordons are a little bit less favored. They're mainly focused on being big and powerful and tractoring a ship and pumping it full of plasma, which is satisfying in its own way, but they don't have as unique a playstyle as some of the others. The Romulans, of course, get a ton of stuff in this module, so it's essential for them. Lots of cool stuff like the optimized Condor carrier, the Royal Hawk, the Flame Hawk, various escorts, and as it says here, there's over 30 ships for them, so definitely get this if you're a Romulan. The ISC gets some cool stuff: carriers, escorts, and destroyer escorts, tactical transports. For the Tholians, you get some photon-armed ships. They did grab up some photon torpedo technology in some of their ships, which is really fun combo with their web-spinning capabilities. And there's also some utility options for them, like various packs and pods to enhance their ships. So yeah, really great one, particularly for the Romulans out there. And again, this one is blessed with more modern counters. You can see we got some big chunky dreadnoughts over here. These big guys up on the top. Various different variations of cruiser hulls. We've got some Klingon hulls again. Then we have our fighters, some snipes. This is this kind of shape here. Loads and loads of cool stuff. Really necessary to get this if you're a Romulan player. Then you got a whole bunch of cool stuff for the Gorns as well. Little bits and bobs for the Federation, but these are actually linked to an article in the SFB magazine, the ADB magazine, I should say, called Captain's Log. So I actually don't know what these are for. I'll need to look that up. I've never really paid attention to those. Then we have our Tholian friends here in their lovely orange with web anchor counters. We've got some smaller ships useful for spinning webs and defending webs. Then we got some fighters, various different cruiser hulls there. Some extra web counters. We've got some Tholian pinwheels, so smaller Tholian patrol corvettes can link up their bums here and become a single unit pinwheel, which is not very mobile, but when sitting behind a web structure, can really pump out loads of firepower. So it's a pretty cool option they have tactically. Then we have the ISC, loads of new frigates, cruisers, got some MRS shuttles. We've got it looks like a battleship over there, which is pretty cool. Dreadnoughts, fighters, carriers, and then we got some Lyrans, just a few WIN there, and some more Captain's Log ships, which again, I do not know what they are. There's a B9 fast battleship, I know what that is. But yeah, I'll need to sort of look up what that's all about. Kind of interesting surprise for me. Alright, then in the SSD book, this is a pretty nice chunky one. I would say probably another 80-pager, I would guess. Yeah, looks like about right. And again, we'll just pick a couple of randos here. How about a Romulan? Let's see. How about the heavy carrier? And then I'll show you a Tholian something. Or maybe an ISC something. Anyway. So here's a Condor V heavy carrier for the Romulans. Got this very characteristic hull shape that you get with the bigger Romulan ships. And you can see it's pretty beefy, 220 points, as you can see up there. Turn mode E, so it's very clunky, but its main job is to fill the board with fighters. We've got the Gladiator D fighters, which have plasma D charges. We've got Gladiator K, which I think add plasma K instead of plasma D. Then we have some electronic warfare variants as well. So just tons of fighters available on this thing. And it also has the ability to use any of the different main sizes of plasma torpedoes. So the plasma R torpedo, if it hits at close range, will do 50 damage in one blast, which is nothing to sneeze at. But the thing about plasma torpedoes is as they go across the map, they gradually fade down to nothing. So once this torpedo has traveled 30 hexes, it'll fade to nothing. But also the plasma torpedoes move at speed 32, the fastest you can move on the map. And then if you play by certain other rules, you can launch plasma torpedoes that move at speed 40, which is quite interesting. Yeah, then we've got some more Romulan carriers. Really a lot of Romulan content. We've got our Gorn friends here. Some strike carriers. And here's this the beginning of the Tholian zone. So we've got a Warcruiser Scout, fairly compact, but a good, powerful ship. It's got 4 special sensors, which give it these special functions to create electronic countermeasures, break lock-ons from enemy weapons. It can attract drones and then blow them up. It can control more seeking weapons. It can identify enemy drones. All kinds of cool, useful features for the scouts. Very useful to have in a fleet. We've got a photon-armed cruiser as well for the Tholians, which is really handy. Tactical transports. I mean, there's loads of cool stuff here for the Tholians. And a minesweeper for when you get into a attrition-based warfare scenario. Some command cruisers. Anyway, I really like these these modules, as you can tell. I get dragged into talking about these because I really think once you get those beginning set of modules that are recommended, R2 through R4 should be your next stop. And R1, if you want general units, you want to run a campaign, get it for sure. But if you're more into duels and setting up random one-off cool battles or base defenses or whatever, you can be pretty good without that, at least in the beginning. But these first 3 R modules are great for all the core empires. Okay, now I'm going to quickly buzz through the rest of the R modules. So if you like the B-10 Klingon battleship, which is in the Advanced Missions box, then you want to get yourself hold of module R5, which is Battleships! ! This is originally published in the Task Force Games era, now published by ADB. This one has not been modified for quite a long time. I don't think there's been any major updates to this module since the 90s. But that's actually kind of a good thing. It means that, pretty much nothing wrong with it. It just works. And basically, it does what it says on the tin. So you get battleships for everybody. So BB is a battleship. So that's a Federation battleship. Then you've got variants like battleship carriers, control ships. Here you have B11 for the Klingons, a variant of the B10, another variant of the B10, which is a carrier. Then you've got the K10 for the Romulans. You've got the Neo-Tholian battleship here. You've got the Kzinti battleship, Gorn battleship, Hydran battleship, which is very scary. Lyrans and ISC. Everybody gets a battleship, which is really fun. Now, these are all quote-unquote conjectural, meaning that in the game's real history, the Starfleet universe history, only the Klingons ever really produced battleships. So these are all kind of what-if scenarios. But, I personally don't really follow the history that closely. I just want to set up, cool balanced battles with, roughly equal point counts or interesting scenarios. So, in my opinion, just go ahead and use them. So here's a random pick. Here's a Kzinti battleship. You can see it's ginormous. Point value 354, which is huge. It can control double the usual number of drones as well. And it's just bristling with weapons. You've got 8 drone racks just on the side here. You've got disruptors at the front. You've got 4 phaser ones as well. Then you've got 4 more drone racks in the back half, more disruptors facing rearward, phaser 3s to defend against incoming fighters and small craft. This is what a typical battleship is like, just a beast, basically. The Federation battleship should be up at the front somewhere, I imagine. Yeah, there we go. Oh, and there's the ISC battleship as well. Point value 360. Got a lot of PPDs, the plasmatic pulsar devices. You got 2 in this front section, plus 6 phaser 1s. 2 more PPDs on the side here. Loads of phasers. You've got, looks like 12 plasma F launchers. So you can just fill the board with seeking weapons, basically. Plus it carries some fighters, so that's handy. And the same again for the Federation battleship. Point value 326. You can see it's a very elongated shape on the SSD. It can carry some F-15 fighters with Gatling phasers. Got 9 drone racks, which is more than enough. Plus a usual complement of phasers and a whole bunch of photon torpedoes. You've got 6 photon torpedoes up at the front. 2 more here in the center. Then all your drones and photons facing rearward as well. So every battleship is just a big kahuna of death. Just able to launch all kinds of stuff at all kinds of hapless enemies. So they're really, really fun to use. But again, if you do care about the history of the Starfleet universe, then you may not want to get into some of this conjectural stuff. But before we go, I'll just show you the Monarch battleship as well, which is really cool. Really gigantic. It's a point value of 390, and I believe that does not include all the fighters. So it can be like 500 points or whatever by itself. It's got fusion beams, it's got hellbores everywhere, it's got 1 million fighters. It's just gigantic, and it's really, really fun to use. So that's Battleships. Yeah, pretty straightforward. If you want Battleships, get Module R5 Battleships. And definitely, I've enjoyed that one. It's one that I did replace because I lost it. I still have actually have 2 sets of the counters in my counter collection, which miraculously did not get destroyed along with all my other stuff. Next up, we have Module R6, Fast Warships. So these are new variants that were developed during a point in the history of the game called the General War. Basically, you have a lot of ships in here that are specialized not to be filled with heavy weapons like your battleships and dreadnoughts and stuff, but they're designed to be maneuverable. So in the strategic game, Federation and Empire, which is another part of the ADB universe, these ships are more mobile. They can do, behind the enemy lines, they can raid and sneak around and do missions that can degrade your opponent's ability to fight. And in game, they basically manifest as having less heavy weapons and more power for speed, essentially. Yeah, you get a nice set of counters in this one. These are not upgraded counters, however. These are old style. It also says these are Klingon ships, but those are definitely Feds. Anyway, so you have some fast cruisers, heavy war destroyers, various other cool things. Got some new shuttle types. You got your Klingons, Romulans, Kazintis, Gorns, Orions, Hydrons, even a few Andromedans, which is cool. You got a bunch of Celtorians, actually, including some fighters. And the Jindarians, I haven't spoken about them yet. They come in a separate module called Module F1. They are kind of a nomadic race that make their ships in the center of hollowed-out asteroids. So they have a tendency to look like a harmless set of floating space junk, and then suddenly they start firing missiles all over the place. They're not everybody's favorite to play because they tend to be a little bit stationary in terms of the best way for them to fight. But they're a pretty cool concept. And also, if you try to invade them with your troops, it's quite bad because they're like these labyrinthine corridors and unhospitable environments inside the asteroids that can make it very hard to capture their ships. Yeah, and then we have some fast ships for the Hydrons, Lyrans, Lyran Democratic Republic, and WIN and ISC as well. So everybody gets some fast warships in this one. This module is a little bit more specialized, maybe. I think, to get into this level, you'd really want to be at a point where you're kind of looking for more variety. You have 96 SSDs here, so plenty of value. But you can see in the ship titles is things like Heavy War Destroyer, police leaders, different kind of escort ships. We already have a lot of variants covering those topics in the other modules I've showed you. So these are kind of more variants if you're really into optimizing some of your kind of squadrons that you're flying against your opponents, or if you want to use them for specific scenarios. I don't see these as being essential add-ons, particularly if you're just an occasional player. But they're definitely worthwhile to have if you're really into the game system and you do want that variety. And there's some cool stuff in here, like this is the Andromedan Dominatrix, an enormous beast with 507 point value. It has a huge amount of power absorber panels to absorb incoming damage. It can use displacement device, and of course the typical arrangements of phasers and so on. It's a big beast. So there's some cool stuff in here, even if you're not really into all the police variants and stuff that's in here. But yeah, I would say this is not a top priority if you're a newish player. If you were going to pick one of the R5, 6, 7 group, probably Battleships is the most accessible, really, because it's just big ships. You don't need to have a lot of game system knowledge. But for Module R6, you kind of want to know what you're talking about a little bit before you start getting into ships like that. R7, however, is again more accessible. I would put this higher up the list than R6. It has just a bunch of powerful, cool ships in it. Light dreadnoughts, heavy dreadnoughts, stellar domination ships, which are battleships that carry racks of fighters and fast patrol ships. Battle carriers have double layouts of fighters compared to normal carriers. You got Dreadnoughts prior to the General War timeline, and then a bunch of Dreadnought variants for the different empires. So if you like big ships, bristling in weapons, which most people do, you can't really go wrong with this one. It's got a small counter sheet, but the ships on it are big. So you got heavy Dreadnought, light Dreadnought, you got this carrier battleship variant. Got some cloak counters, which is helpful. You've got Orion pirate stuff, new cool beasts for the Romulans, and some Neo-Tholian Dreadnoughts for the Tholians. You got a few bits and bobs for the ISC Lyrans and WIN, but not that much. A bit more for the Hydrons, a few biggies for the Andromedans, and just a smattering of stuff for some of the other empires. And then you've got some additional terrain pieces and general units as well. I think this is a really nice and accessible module. And there's ship types in here that I really like. I like the heavy Dreadnoughts. I like the battleship carriers and the Stellar Domination ships, which is a really cool name for a ship class, by the way. And they really are scary when they hit the board. I mean, they're filled with fast patrol ships. They've got tons of firepower from fighters and stuff. There are also some cool variants in here, like the Plasma Dreadnought from the Feds. The Federation are not normally known for using plasma torpedoes, but they did experiment with it in the Starfleet universe. And it's cool as a Federation player to experiment with some of that stuff. So here we go. Here's a Federation Plasma Dreadnought. So you can see it still has photon torpedoes, 6 of them, in fact, up front. But you can also use Type F plasmas. They don't travel very far, but they just mix up your offense a little bit. They kind of they require a different kind of response from your opponent. You can experiment with some new tactical combinations. It's a lot of fun. So I like having variants like that for the races where you take they still have their key USPs, photon torpedoes in the case of the Federation, and but then you add a little wrinkle to it. That means you have to play it really differently. Here's one of the Stellar Domination ships. You can see there's a huge array of different fighters you can load on these things. They've got a big point value, 358, plus all the fighters. So if one of these is on the board, you really have to be careful because they will just decimate you with wave after wave of fighters. Here's Drone Dreadnought from the Kzintis. So you can see here it's got 18 drone racks. That's a ridiculous number. That ship alone can fill the board with missiles, and it's not going to be super fun to be on the other side of that. You've got heavy carriers for the Hydrons, which you can see they are gigantic. Really great fun. As a Hydron player, you should be into using fighters anyway, and this just gives you more cool ways to drop fighters on the board. I recommend this module. There's a lot of cool variants in there. You do really want to have the fighters in use in your game, at your table, I should say, to make the most use of it. But there's lots of cool ships in there. Okay, now the last few modules in the R series are getting quite a bit more specialized. So I'll just try and cover these fairly quickly and highlight the ones that I think are the most useful and interesting for a broader section of the player base. So Module R8 is System Defense Command. R8, so you can see here. I quite like this module. It's not typically one the type that I would like because it's a lot of stuff in here about local defense. So like National Guard ships for different empires, auxiliary ships, police ships and carriers that guard the home front. But since I like playing interesting scenarios, it's really great to have some of these ships in the selection because, you can do cool stuff like a heavily armed specialized Federation warfleet coming to attack the Hydron homeworld, and there's loads of lightly armed police carriers and stuff trying to desperately hold back the invading force until they can bring their heavy carriers back from wherever they were adventuring around. And there's just loads of cool stuff you can imagine with these local defense scenarios. So I do actually like this module quite a bit. And there's some cool ships in here as well. These are all your local defenders for the Hydrons and Andromedans. Then you've got some local ships for the Feds, only a couple for the Tholians and the Orions, and the Romulans as well. A better selection for the Lyrans and ISC. But there's a bunch of general units in here, and that I think some people get turned off by that because general units feel more generic, but they're useful to have, again, for scenario play in particular. Decent selection of stuff for the Klingons. They get some good stuff in here. But yeah, again, this is quite specialized. So if you're not really into, dealing with different kinds of general units that realistically would make sense in a space navy and in an interstellar empire, but you may not particularly want to play them, that's kind of up to you to judge how you feel about it. But you can see they're really focused on this local defense and naval reserve kind of stuff. So these are not big, impressive ships. These are fast and light security vessels patrolling the home front. You can see they're not anything gigantic. Lots of light frigates. That's a National Guard heavy cruiser, but compared to a heavy cruiser you would see, say in Module R7, it's much smaller, only 100 points. So yeah, R8 definitely on the more specialized side, but I find it quite fun to have, and I like the scenarios that come with it. R9, this one is pretty cool. This is basically centered around conjectural ships, or ships that, in the SFU history were only built once or twice, so very rare stuff. So there's a lot of kind of specialty niche stuff. X Dreadnoughts, so those are ships that use X technology. You need module X1 to use those, so not really relevant because I haven't shown you that stuff yet. But there are some cool bits in here. Heavy scout carriers, so they carry a lot of fighters, but also have scout capabilities with special sensors. You've got medium dreadnoughts, which were kind of advancements on the light dreadnoughts. You've got National Guard ships that carry fast patrol ships for home defense. You've got more Mauler ships, which I like, but they're hard to use. War dreadnoughts, which were kind of cruisers that were beefed up into hardcore warships. You've got the massive Andromedan Mauler called the Shiva. You've got survey ships, which are more kind of like what the Enterprise was. They're out to explore and catalog things as much as blow things up. But yeah, lots of new SSDs in here. But if you don't care about conjectural units, you won't care about this. And if you don't have some other rule sets for the core gaming system, like the X1 module, for example, you'll get a little bit less use out of this. So not really a priority, I think, for most people. But I'm glad I have it because there is some cool conjectural stuff in here. So here, for example, you have like a light X Dreadnought, which, you need the X module to use. But yeah, there is some cool stuff in here for the different empires. But some ships I like for the Tholians are in here, which makes it handy because I do like playing the Tholians. And there's a nice Klingon emergency battleship variant, which is a very fun ship to play. We've also got the MB-10 mobile battleship variant. So there is some cool stuff, but I wouldn't say this is a priority for most players. Let me see. I'll pick out a couple of interesting tidbits here. Okay. So new Dreadnought, and then... okay. So first I'll show you the Federation new Dreadnought, which is up here. So this is kind of a flavor. This is, a more specialized variant ship. It's a Dreadnought that has some boost from advances in technology from earlier in the SFU timeline. So there's really not that kind of stands out about some of these ships, but if you're really intimately aware of how to play different ship classes for the Federation, for example, there will be little differences in here that actually make a big difference in how you play these ships. So this is a module that I think benefits you when you really have a lot of experience with the game system. The medium Dreadnought is a little bit more funky looking, as you can see. Quite a heavy point value at 264. Very beefy ship here. But yeah, some of this stuff is really not going to come into its own until you're pretty deeply enmeshed in Starfleet battles. Let me see. I went a bit too far. So yeah. Here's an interesting one. One of the many battleship variants for the Klingons. This is the Mauler battleship. So 340 points, so it's a big boy. You can see it's got all the usual stuff, phasers, disruptors, blah, blah, blah. But then you have a Mauler functionality as well. And, you can trace the lines here and see that it's got absolute loads of batteries here and here and here and here. And you've got 2 warp engines, of course. All of this stuff can be pumping power into the Mauler aspect. And basically, if a ship this size with this much power can unleash a full Mauler blast on your face, you're going to explode. Yeah. So this is a very scary ship for like base sieges and stuff, but Maulers are tough to use properly. They're very effective in the Federation Empire strategic gaming system for the Starfleet universe, but at Starfleet battle scale, they're much more difficult to use correctly. Anything else interesting that pops off the page? We've got a Mauler cruiser from the Hydrons. It's kind of cool. It's not really the style of ship that I would typically leap for with the Hydrons. I'm more interested in, filling the board with fighters and trying to close to close range and blast people with a barrage of fusion beams and hellbores and stuff. And trying to set up a complicated Mauler setup is going to be pretty hard to manage. Yeah, I think, is this the Shiva? Yeah, this is the Andromedan mothership / Mauler. Andromedan batteries carry more power than regular batteries, so this thing can really rip you to shreds. And you can see it's 500 points. And then it has this huge set of battery records to help you keep track of how much they're charged up. So yeah, in typical Andromedan style, this is a real beast, but if you manage to load those power absorber panels with damage quickly enough, it'll cause an overflow of energy, cascade through the ship, and blow them up before they can do too much to you. So yeah, that is R9. It's a really interesting module, actually. I like the conjectural ships. I like when the designers experiment with weird stuff, and there's plenty of that in this one for sure. So definitely was worth it for me, but it may not be for everybody. And again, some of these variants won't really shine until you kind of know what the game system is all about. And the same again applies to this one. This is module R10, the new cruisers. This module was a little bit controversial depending on who you ask, because essentially what this is cruisers that are just straight better than cruisers earlier in the timeline. But I mean, it makes sense that if you care about the SFU timeline, as a war progresses, we advance technology quickly, right? I mean, in World War II, we started with biplanes and ended with jets. It's a huge difference in fighter technology in just a few years. So it makes sense that in a massive space war, the same thing would happen. But it's a little bit tougher to make that work in a game system, because basically you're going to end up with ships that are very similar to previous ones, but are just better. But actually, I think I really like this module because it has variants that are actually interesting to play, and it includes cool rules that add some challenge to these very powerful ships. So, for example, the high-speed plasma sabot, which I mentioned before, that's a speed 40 plasma torpedo. So on 8 impulses of the turn, it moves 2 hexes instead of 1. Really hard to dodge and really messes things up. If you have a certain playstyle to run away from plasma torpedoes, then introducing those, even with these fast and powerful cruisers, is going to add some challenge for you. So that's really cool. The Gorns get a new plasma usage that allows them to dig up cloaked enemies, which is pretty cool. So there are some new rules in here as well. And then you get all these different cruiser variants. But yeah, I think you're really not going to have a lot of use for these until you really want to mix it up with your cruiser duels and you have a lot of experience in the system. You can see it's one of the smaller counter sheets again. And they're all, the counters all basically look the same because they're basically variants on a small subset of hulls. So if you're a specialist in SFB, then this will definitely jump out at you and you'll say, wow, they really did it. They made all these variants with, all these cool additional stuff, and it'll sing to you. But if you're new, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. But, again, we have cool stuff like a new plasma cruiser. We've got new heavy fighter carriers. We've got fast cruisers, drone bombardment stuff. I mean, there's loads of cool variants in here. But yeah, if you're not super aware of what the non-new cruisers were doing, and you need to get to grips with that first, really. But actually in a recent Facebook discussion, somebody mentioned this was their favorite module overall. So it definitely has its fans. And I do like it. I think it has some interesting creative solutions. When the designers were thinking, well, what would happen in the general war as, people were trying to one-up each other with new designs that could hit the line and try and, develop some advantage on the battlefield. Well, I think they came up with some good ideas, and they definitely have some extra oomph. But you wouldn't want to face these against non-new cruisers. I think it would just be a little bit one-sided, But yeah, it's a nice module, but again, I would put this in the category of, wait until you have a good amount of experience with the system before you really pursue it. Then we have module R11. Hang in there, guys. We're almost done. So R11, support ships, pretty much does what it says on the tin. This is all about kind of ships that support fleet operations, right? So you have things like division control ships, which are like space control ships that carry lots of fighters and stuff, but they're a little bit less. You've got fast cruisers, you've got transports, workboats, new types of bases like construction bases. You've got new types of carriers for the Federation. You've got some system defense ships, colonial ships. I mean, this is definitely something that appeals if you're doing campaign play. But outside of that, I don't think you really need to prioritize it as a newer player. There are some cool things in here that I like. I like the division control ships because it's like a heavy carrier without quite as much huge squadrons hitting the board all at once, so a little bit less mayhem on the board. I do like that there's some additional Andros in here. I always love some Andro stuff. Yeah, but really this is... I think if you're not playing like a campaign type structure, a lot of these ships won't do an awful lot for you. I think some of the heavy carriers would be maybe worth having, but you'd be paying for a whole module for just probably a subset of things that would really interest you. Like this heavy fighter carrier for the Feds. It's pretty neat with some A-20 fighters, but yeah, I would say. Instead, so you'll notice I have an extra rulebook for R12. There's a little bit of a story there. But module R12, I really, really like. And this, I think, is more broadly applicable. So here, it's just unusual ships, one-offs and weirdnesses. Stellar fortress bases, asteroid mining ships, various types of destroyers, cruisers, drone bombardment ships, ships that have quirks to them. I think this is one of the best R modules, personally. There's a load of variety in here for basically every empire, and they're all sort of quirky and interesting to fly. And that really is when SFB shines the most, in my opinion. Of course, it's a recent module, so we get nice counters in here. And there's really a bit of everything. You've got some cruisers, you've got frigates, you've got PF tenders, you've got some Orions over here, you've got some stuff for the Klingons. You've got the Vudar, who are a Klingon subject race. They get covered in module F2. That's where the rules for them are, and they use ion cannons. Then you've got some Romulans, you've got Tholians, you've got... who are these guys? I guess those are Jandarians. I'm not sure, actually. I never played them, so I don't know. We've got some cool stuff for the Hydrons, of course. You've got Lyrans with some fast patrol ships here. Just a few things for the ISC. But even the Celtorians get a look in here. You've got some weird-looking ships here from the Gorn. You can see they've got odd-looking ships there. And some general units. But yeah, this is a great module. If you've gotten into the system a little bit, you've picked up R2, 3, and 4. You've had lots of different duels, and you really want to challenge yourself with some interesting ships to fight and fly. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in this module. So R12, Unusual Ships, gets my recommendation. Definitely more so than R8, 9, and 10, or 11 for that matter, which are really more specialist. I guess in a sense these are specialists too, but the difference is that they just have these interesting quirks. And I like some of these specific ship roles, like the war cruiser leaders are interesting. I like command cruisers that, I like ships that are kind of multifunctional and are not just solely dedicated to being the strongest in battle, but they have extra little tidbits. Like, this is a heavy destroyer that has some fighters as well. There's some cool stuff to mix things up. So yeah, R12 it was a recent module, has a lot of interesting designs in it. So I do recommend this one once you've got some mastery of the system and you want to try something a little bit different. And you have some pretty impressive stuff like the battle wagon for the Celtorians, which is a gigantic ship. This is what they used to fight back against the Tholians back in the day in their home galaxy. So yeah, okay. that is a pretty comprehensive look at every R module except for R1, because that's the most boring one, and I don't currently own it. But I hope this gives you, again, probably way more information than you need about the Starfleet Battles gaming system. But I really love this game. You can see, this stack of books here. Each one of these modules will cost you about £20 or so, often less. And each one has anywhere from 50 to 100 plus ships in it. So just an absolute ton of gameplay value. Of course, it's useful to buy the physical product and then to get PDFs of the SSD books for the modules that you're going to use a lot, rather than having to repeatedly copy your physical SSD books or anything like that. But really, if you want to jump into the R modules, just as a final reminder, it's heavy. I think you want to start off with R2, 3, and 4. That'll give you a lot more cool stuff for all the main combatants in the Starfleet universe. Then I would look into R5 if you want big kahuna battleships, and R7 if you want dreadnoughts. I would skip, honestly, 8, 9, 10, 11 for the time being, because they are more kind of campaign-oriented. If you're really into cruiser combats and you want some interesting variants, then you might like R10. But so this is R10, sorry. So think about that. And then if you want to fully utilize the rules in some of these, you will want to have modules J, J2, M, and maybe module K, the fast patrol ships that I mentioned before. So next time I will come back to you and talk a little bit about the rest of the C module series. So these are more new empires. And I may also talk to you a bit about the Omega Quadrant, or Omega Octant, sorry, which is a whole new area of the galaxy carved out for the Starfleet universe that has no presence in original Star Trek, but it has a ton of creative ideas for the game system. It's a lot of fun to explore. So hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or you want more detailed recommendations, hit me up in the comments. And I'll come back to you later with more Starfleet Battle stuff, and eventually Federation Commander as well. So I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe out there, and see you all again soon. Bye-bye.